So I just told you now that I am potentially recording some of these. So this is chapter 3. I think there's only a couple pages long, or it's only a couple pages long, so I might read also chapter 4. But you'll also probably hear me responding back to you and eating a couple of M&Ms. Alright, chapter 3. There are a lot of unexpected humiliations in high school, but none of them had ever been... Oh my god. I'm reading all this wrong. I got so flustered talking to you. There are a lot of unexpected public humiliations in high school, but none of them had ever happened to me until 8 a.m. on that first day of senior year. Because at 8 a.m., at 8:10 a.m., I realized that not only did I have no one to sit with during the welcome back pep rally, but I was also going to have to take the front row, since the bleachers were too cramped for my knee. The front row was where all the teachers and this one goth girl in a wheelchair who insisted she was a witch. But there was no way I was going to be... I'm reading all this so wrong. The front row was all the teachers and this one goth girl in a wheelchair who insisted that she was a witch. But there was no way I was going to hobble feebly up the stairs with the whole school watching. And they were watching. I could feel their eyes on me. And not because I had won a record percentage of the vote in the class council elections, or held hands with Charlotte Hyde as we waited in the coffee line in the upper quad. This was different. It made me want to cringe away in silent apology from the dark circles under my eyes and the fact that I had no summer tan to speak of. It made me want to disappear. A balloon arch and butchered paper signs decorated each section of the bleachers. I sat directly beneath the R and Go seniors, and watched the leaders of student government associations huddled together in the center of the basketball court. They wore plastic leis and sunglasses. Jill Nakamura, our new class president, was dressed in a bikini top and denim cutoffs. And then the huddle broke apart, and I caught sight of Charlotte laughing with her friends in their short, sung-squat skirts. Her eyes met mine, and she looked away, embarrassed. But that one moment had told me all I needed to know. The tragedy of what happened at Jonas Brigger's party was mine, and mine alone. And then a small miracle happened, and Toby Ellicott sat down next to me. "Did you hear about the bees?" he asked cheerfully. "What?" "They're disappearing," he said. "Scientists are stumped. I read it in the newspaper this morning." "Maybe it's a hoax," I said. "I mean, how can you prove something like that?" "A bee census?" he suggested. "Anyhow, I'm going to buy stock in honey." Toby and I hadn't spoken in years. He was on the debate team, and our schedules rarely overlapped. It didn't look much like the pudgy, besticle best friend I'd lost somewhere in the first few weeks of 7th grade. His dark hair still flopped all over the place, but he was a lanky 6'2". He straightened his bow tie, unbuttoned his blazer, and stretched his legs out on the front of him, as though the teacher's bleachers was a choice seat. "You should get a sword cane," he said. "That would be badass. I know a guy, if you're interested." "You know a sword cane guy?" "Don't sound so surprised on my shadowy connections, Faulkner. Technically, he deals in concealed weaponry." The music started, then a deafening blast of speaker static that gave way to the opening bars of an overplayed Vampire Weekend single. SGA began clapping in the cheesy "let's get the party started" way, and Jill squealed into the microphone how super psyched she was for the best school year ever. Inexplicably, SGA launched some sort of coordinated hula dance in their sunglasses and leis. I couldn't get over how wrong it was. Doing the hula to the African drum beats of East Coast prep rock band? "Please tell me I'm hallucinating," Toby muttered. "Seniors, where's your school spirit?" Jill called. The response was deafening. I can't hear you, Jill challenged, cocking her hip. Kill me now, moaned Toby. I would, but I seem to be lacking a sword cane, I told him. Mrs. Levine, who was sitting next to Toby, glared at us. Behave or leave, gentlemen, she snarled. Toby snorted. When the song finally ended, Jimmy Fuller took the microphone. He was wearing his tennis wrap warm-ups, and I couldn't help but notice that the team had gotten new uniforms. What up, Eastwood? He boomed. It's time to meet your varsity sport teams. As if on cue, a side door to the gym opened, and the football team poured out in their pads and jerseys. Behind them was the baseball team, then tennis, then water polo. But by that point, I'd stopped paying attention to the teams and their orders. My former life, in its entirety, was standing in the center of the basketball courts while I sat on the teacher bleachers. And there was no way in hell I was going to clap for them. Mostly I just wanted to get out of that pep rally and away from all of it. Hey Ezra, Toby whispered loudly. Got a nicotine patch, buddy? Get out, Miss Levine demanded. Both of you, now! Toby and I looked at each other, shrugged, and shouldered our bags. It was bright outside. The sky cloudless and impossibly blue. I winced and hung back in the shade of the stucco overhang, fumbling for my sunglasses. A nicotine patch? I asked. Well, it got us kicked out, didn't it? Toby said smugly. Yeah, I guess it did. Thanks. For what? I want to get out of there. Miss Levine has awful breath. We wound up passing the time in the annex, the study room that connected the debate and newspaper classroom. Everyone else was at the rally, and we could hear muffled screams coming from the gym at regular intervals. It sounds like Disneyland or something, Toby offered with a grin. I was surprised he'd mention it. Have you been back? I asked. Are you kidding? I'm there every single day. They gave me a free lifetime pass. I'm like the mayor of Adventureland. So, no, then, I said. Have you? I shook my head. You could get a handicap pass, Toby pressed. Skip all the lines. Next time I ask a girl on a date, I'll be sure to mention that. For some reason, I didn't mind Toby giving me crap about the cane, and I was generally pretty sensitive about it. You would be too, if you spent most of your summer vacation trying to get your well-meaning but overbearing mother to stop hovering outside the bathroom door every time you took a shower. She was paranoid that I'd slip and die, since I refused to let her install those metal handrails. I was paranoid that she'd come inside and catch me, showering. What are you doing for team electives? Toby asked. We had a 4-year requirement. Speech and debate, I admitted, suddenly realizing that Toby might be in my class. Dude, I'm team captain this year. You should compete. I'm just taking it for the requirement, I said. Debate's not really my thing. Back then, my impression of the debate team was that it was a bunch of guys who put on business suits during the weekend and thought that they actually had something meaningful to say about foreign policies because they enrolled in AP government. Maybe not, but you owe me. I got us out of the pep rally, Toby protested. We're even. I told Tug Mason not to piss in your backpack in the 8th grade locker room. You still owe me. He pissed in my Gatorade instead. Huh. I'd forgotten about that. The bell rang then. Hey, Flockner. Want to know something depressing? Toby asked, picking up his bag. What? First period hasn't even started yet. I'll just pause a little second to blow my nose and then start reading chapter 4. Oh, so you didn't really respond. At least my phone isn't showing it. But he kind of just went, aww, baby. It was very cute that you said aw twice. Very adorable. Anyways, you did not reply. I just said, what? So I'm going to keep reading. And we'll see what happens. Chapter 4. The one interesting thing about being signed up for the speech and debate was that I'd given up I'd been given a humanities odd schedule. Eastwood High is on a block scheduling, and ever since freshman year, my schedule had been humanities even with the other athletes, but not anymore. I had my first period AP Euro, which was unfortunate because 1. Mr. Anthony, the tennis coach, was the AP Euro teacher, and 2. His classroom was on the second floor of the 400 building, which meant that 3. I had to get up a flight of stairs. Over the summer, stairs had become my nemesis, and I often went out of the way to avoid public confrontation with them. I was supposed to pick up an elevator key from the front office. It came with a matching set with that little blue parking tag for my car, the one I was never, ever going to display. By the time I got to AP Euro via rarely used stairwell near their staff parking lot, Mr. Anthony had already begun taking roll. He paused briefly to frown at me over the manila folder, and I cringed in silent apology as I slid into a seat in the back. When he called my name, I mumbled, "Here," without looking up. I was surprised he'd actually called me. Usually my teachers did this thing where they reached my name on their roll sheet. "Ezra Faulkner is here," they'd say, putting a tick in the box before moving down the list. It was as though they were pleased to have me, as though my presence meant the class would be better somehow. But when Coach A paused after calling my name, and I had to confirm for him that I was in the room even though he knew damn well that I walked in 30 seconds late, I wondered for a moment if I really was there. I glanced up, and Coach A was giving me that glare he used to whenever we weren't hustling fast enough during practice. "Consider this your tardiness warning, Mr. Faulkner," he said. "So noted," I muttered. Mr. Anthony continued with roll. I wasn't really listening, but he got to one name that I didn't quite catch. There was a perceptible shift in the room. A new student. She sat on the other way, near the bookshelves, and all I could see was a sleeve of green sweater and a cascade of red hair. The syllabus was nothing surprising, although Mr. Anthony apparently believed otherwise. He talked about what it meant to be an advanced placement history course, as though we hadn't all taken AP US history with Mrs. Welsh as juniors. A lot of the guys on the tennis didn't care for Coach Anthony because they thought he was a hard ass. I was used to strict coaches. But I was quickly realizing that without any other athletes in the class, Mr. Anthony was just plain strict. "You should have done the summer reading," Mr. Anthony said, as though that was an accusation rather than a fact. "Medieval Europe from the fall of Rome to the Renaissance. If you felt such an assignment was beneath you, then you'd be rearranging your plans for the weekend. You might even consider your weekends to be a history." No one laughed. "The Roman Empire 200 BC to 474 AD, he scrawled on the board, and then raised an eyebrow, as though enjoying a private joke. There was this horrible stretch of silence as we tried to figure out why he wasn't saying anything, and then finally Zhao Lin raised his hand. "I'm sorry, but I think 476 AD is correct," he mumbled. "Thank you, Mr. Lin, for displaying the barest level of competency in reading comprehension." Wow. And Mr. Anthony snapped, correcting the date on the board. "And now, I wonder if anyone here can tell us why the phrase Holy Roman Empire is a misnomer. Mr. Faulkner, perhaps?" If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that was a sneer on Coach A's lip. Alright, let's call it a sneer. I got that he was disappointed I couldn't play anymore, but I'd sort of hoped he wouldn't be a jerk about it. "It only applies after Charlemagne," I offered, inking over the letters on my syllabus. "That's a community college answer," Coach announced. "Would you care to rephrase it and try for a UC school?" I don't know why I said it, except maybe I didn't want to take crap from Coach A for the rest of the year, but before I could really think it through, I leaned back in my chair and replied, "Yeah, okay. 2 reasons. 1, the Holy Roman Empire was originally called the Frankish Kingdom until the Pope crowned Charlemagne the Emperor of the Romans, and 2, it wasn't holy, or Roman, or even an empire. It was really just this, casual alliance of Germanic tribal states." I never really shot my mouth off in class before, and I instantly regretted it. I usually had the right answer when I was called on, and my grades were good enough, but I wasn't what anyone would consider brainy. I'd just done a lot of reading and thinking over the summer because there wasn't really much else to do. Enjoy your weekend, Mr. Faulkner, Coach sneered, and I realized that instead of getting him off my back, I'd made him want to get back at me. I'd nearly forgotten we were on pep rally schedule until I was halfway out the classroom door, thinking I was... what? Thinking I was on break, I think the page said. Oh, I was halfway out the classroom door thinking it was a break and someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was the new girl. She clutched a crumpled class schedule and stared up at me, as though I'd somehow given her the impression that I was the right person to talk on her first day. I wasn't expecting her eyes, deep and disquieting and dark blue, the sort of eyes that made you wonder if the skies opened up when she got angry. Sorry, she said, glancing back down on her schedule. First period is supposed to end at 9:35, but the bell didn't ring until 9:50. It's the pep rally, I told her. Break is cancelled and we go straight to third. Oh. She pushed her bag to the side and hesitated a moment before asking. So what do you have next? AP American Lit? Me too. Can you show me where that is? Ordinarily, I could have. On the first day of junior year, I'd even stop to help a few confused-looking freshmen in the quad who'd stood gawking at the map in the back of their day planners as though they were stuck in some sort of incomprehensible labyrinth. Sorry, no, I said, hating myself for it. Okay. I watched her walk away, and I thought about how most of the girls at Eastwood, or at least the ones worth noticing, all looked the same. Blonde hair, lots of makeup, stupidly expensive handbags. The new girl was nothing like that, and I didn't know what to make of the shabby boys button-down tucked into her jean shorts, or the worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder, like something out of an old-fashioned movie. She was pretty, though, and I wondered where she'd come from, and why she hadn't bothered to try and fit in. I wanted to follow her and apologize, or at least explain, but I didn't. Instead, I grappled with the stairwell near the faculty lot, crossed the quad over towards the 100 building, and opened the door of AP American Lit several minutes in arrears of the bell. I had Mr. Moreno before for Honors Brit Lit. He supposedly been writing the same novel for the past 20 years, and either he genuinely loved teaching or he'd never outgrown high school because it was sort of depressing how hard he tried to get us psyched about Shakespeare. Moreno hadn't cared that I was late for class. He hadn't even noticed. The DVD player wasn't working, and he was on his hands and knees with the disc clutched in his teeth, prodding at the cables. Finally, Luke Shepard, the president of the film club, arrogantly stepped in, and we all sat and watched The Great Gatsby. The original, not the remake. I hadn't seen it before, and the film was old-fashioned and sort of bored me. The book had been our summer readings, and the movie wasn't nearly as good. What I hated, though, was the part with the car accident. I knew it was coming, but that didn't stop it from being any less terrible to watch. I shut my eyes, but I could still hear it. Hear the policeman telling the crowds of onlookers how the son of a bitch didn't even stop his car. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel everyone staring at me, and I wished they wouldn't. It was unsettling the way my classmates watched me, as though I fascinated and terrified them, as though I never belonged. When class let out, I briefly considered the quad, with its harsh sunlight and cafe tables. My old crew sat at the most visible table, the one by the wall that divided the upper and lower quads. I pictured them in their new uniforms, the first day of senior year, telling stories about summer sports camps and beach vacations, laughing over how young the freshmen looked. And then I pictured sitting down at the table. I pictured no one saying anything, but all of them thinking, "You're not one of us anymore." I wasn't class president, or tennis team captain. I wasn't dating Charlotte, and I didn't drive a shiny Beamer. I wasn't king any longer, so it was only fitting to take my exile. Which is why, instead of gambling my last few chips of dignity, I wound up avoiding the quad entirely, and decamping on that shaded stairwell out the near faculty lot with my headphones on, wondering why I hadn't known it would be quite this bad. There was only one senior level Spanish class, which meant another year with Mrs. Martin. She urged us all to call her Señora Martinez back in English 1. But that was completely ridiculous on the account of her husband being the pastor of local Lutheran church. She was one of those cookie-baking, over-mothering types who festooned her sweaters with festive holiday pins and treated us all like second graders. I was the first to arrive, and Mrs. Martin beamed at me and whispered that her congregation had prayed for me after the accident. I could think of so many more worthwhile things they could have prayed for, but I didn't have the heart to tell her. Gracias, Señora Martinez, I muttered, taking my usual seat. Yo, Faulkner, Evan nodded in greetings as he and the 3 guys from the tennis team slid into seats around mine as though nothing was the least bit changed. They were carrying Burger King bags and wore matching tennis backpacks. The pro kind we'd been begging Coach to approve for years. I was so distracted by their backpacks that I failed to notice 2 things. That they'd all gone off campus for lunch, and that Evan's uniforms sported an extra line of embroidery. Aren't you going to congratulate me on making captain? Evan reached into his bag and unwrapped a massive double burger. The smell of warm onions and clammy meat patties filled the classroom. Congratulations, I said, unsurprised. Evan was the most likely choice for it, after all. Well, someone had to take over your gimp ass. Evan's surfer baritone made the insult sound strangely friendly. Jimmy, who was sitting behind me, held out what had to be a full-size bucket of fries. Want some? Sure you can't finish that yourself? I deadpanned. Nah, I got enough for everyone in case Señora Martin got mad. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Dude, Evan said, clapping me on the shoulder. You in for Chipotle tomorrow? Taco Tuesday. Gotta get some taco and guac. Jesus Christ. No one calls it that. I shook my head, grinning. It was strange, my crew acting the same as they always had, and for a moment, I wondered if it was really that easy. If I could go for Mexican food with a team I no longer belonged to. If I even wanted to hang out with them, now that I'd gone from leader to liability. And then Charlotte waltzed in an all too familiar cloud of fruity perfume, and grabbed a handful of fries from Jimmy's bucket. She perched on top of the desk next to Evan's, her long squat skirt swishing against her tan thighs. Where are my fries? She demanded, poking Evan with her shoe. Well, Jimmy got enough for everyone. Evan's face fell as he realized he'd screwed up. But I didn't ask Jimmy to get my fries. I asked you, she said, pouting. Sorry, babe. I'll make it up to you. Evan leaned across the aisle, going in for a kiss, and if I hadn't figured it out before I knew it then. They were dating. Not right now. My hands are greasy, Charlotte said, turning away. Did you at least get my napkins? Oops. Forgot. How fucking useless is this guy? I suppose it should have been painful to see them together. My ex-girlfriend was one of my best friends. I really should have wondered not just how, but when it had happened. But I felt oddly detached, as though it was too much effort to care. I sighed and took a packet of tissues from my backpack, passing it to Charlotte. Thanks. She couldn't even bear to look at me, and I couldn't tell whether it was out of guilt or pity. Jill Nakamura joined us, then, still wearing her sunglasses. She gave Charlotte a hug before taking a seat, like they hadn't just seen each other at lunch. Ugh, we have like 2 classes together this year, Charlotte complained. I allowed myself to smirk as Jill made up some excuse about student government screwing with her schedule. Truth was, Jill and I had been in the same honors courses since 10th grade, but we had an unspoken understanding to keep quiet about that sort of thing. I watched as Charlotte put the packet of tissues into her handbag. My packet of tissues, actually. Oh my god, Charlotte said, zipping her bag with a flourish. Look, it's like she robbed the lost and found bin. The boys' lost and found bin, Jill stifled a laugh. Oh my god, the fucking new girl just entered. Yep, the new girl stood in the doorway, surveying the mostly filled rows of seats. I could see her trying to be brave about the unwanted attention. Thankfully, Mrs. Martin stepped to the front of the classroom, clapped a sort of rhythm for silence, like they were all in 3rd grade, and called, Hola, class. I had to do a pathetic Spanish accent. Hola, class. I've been fairly ambivalent about Spanish. Usually I could waste a good 5 minutes pondering Mrs. Martin's pin of the day, and occasionally we got to sit back and watch Spanish-dubbed Disney movies. But when Miss Martin told us that we'd be interviewing a classmate and introducing them to class in Espanol, I realized that Spanish had the capacity to be even worse than that morning's pep rally. I watched as everyone around me, who had been so friendly only minutes before, partnered together. In the past, I had always had someone to work with, but clearly things had changed. And then I caught a sight of the new girl staring down at a blank page in her notebook. I claimed the seat next to hers, and grinned in the way that girls usually found irresistible. So, what's your name? I asked. Don't we have to speak in Spanish? She countered, unimpressed. Miss Martin doesn't care, as long as we do when we give our presentations. How challenging. She shook her head, opening to a blank page in her notebook. Well, me llamo Cassidy. ¿Cómo te llamas? Me llamo Ezra, I said, writing her name down. Cassidy. I liked the sound of it. We felt silent for a moment, listening to one of the groups around us struggle in tortured Spanish. Everyone else was using English because, as I said, Mrs. Martin didn't care. Well, Cassidy prompted me. Oh, sorry, ¿de dónde has venido de? Jesus Christ. She raised an eyebrow. ¿Dónde? What? ¿Dónde de la Barrow School de San Francisco? ¿Y tú? That's not even Spanish. I hadn't heard of the Barrow School, but I imagined it as some sort of rigid prep school, which only made her appearance of Eastwood High even more odd. I told her I was from here. So, ¿es una escuela donde duerme uno con el otro? What the fuck? I asked. My Spanish was rusty and not that great to begin with. Yeah, clearly. She burst out laughing in an unencumbered way that you sometimes do at parties or lunch tables, but never in a quiet classroom. Charlotte and Jill whipped around to stare at us. Sorry, Cassidy's lips twisted into a smirk, mocking me. But you seriously want to know if all the students sleep with each other? I winced. I was trying to ask if it was a boarding school. Sí, es un internado. A boarding school, she replied. Maybe we should switch to English. And so we did, and I learned that Cassidy had just completed high school summer program at Oxford, studying Shakespeare. That one weekend, she'd nearly gotten stranded in Transylvania, that she'd been teaching herself how to play guitar on the roof of her dormitory because the acoustics of Gothic architecture. Oh, I love this woman. I'd never been out of the country, unless driving the 3 hours to Tijuana with Jimmy, Evan, Charlotte, and Jill last spring counted. I'd certainly never been to the Globe Theatre, or had my passport stolen by gypsies at Dracula's castle, or climbed out of my bedroom window with a guitar strapped to my back. Everything I had done, everything that defined me, was stuck firmly in the past. But Cassidy was waiting patiently, a fountain pen poised above the pale lines of her notebook. I sighed and gave her the standard Spanish class answers. that I was 17 years old, and my favorite sport was tennis, and my favorite subject was history. Well, Cassidy said, when I had finished, that was certainly boring. I know, I muttered. Sorry. I don't get you, she said, frowning. Practically everyone goes out of their way to avoid you, but they can't stop staring. And then you sit with that crowd in the corner like you're the freaking prom king or whatever it's called, and all you can say to yourself is "Me gusta el tenis," which, I'm sorry, but you obviously can't play. I shrugged, trying to not let it show how much it unnerved me that she noticed these things. Maybe I was the prom king, I finally said. This infuriated her. I tried not to laugh at how ridiculous it seemed now, that stupid plastic junior prom crown and scepter gathering dust on my bookshelf, when I hadn't even made it to the dance. We sat there, studiously ignoring each other until it was our turn to present. Yo presento Cassidy, I said, and Charlotte giggled loudly. Mrs. Martin frowned. Butch Cassidy, Charlotte Sage whispered, sending Jill into muffled hysterics. I knew what Charlotte could be like, and the last thing Cassidy needed was to become the new object of her torture. So I made up a boring story about how Cassidy's favorite subject was English, and that she liked to dance ballet and had a younger brother who played soccer. I did her a favor, making her forgettable rather than giving Charlotte further ammunition, but clearly Cassidy didn't see it that way, because after I finished, she grinned evilly, pushed up the sleeves of her sweater, and calmly told the class, "This is Ezra. He was the prom king, and he was the best tennis player in the whole school." Fuck. And that was the end of chapter 4. I'll leave it at that. Try and possibly read another chapter, but I might need to go to bed soon. And I'll text you back. See if maybe you'd forgotten or something. I love you. Hope you're doing okay. And I hope you're doing good at camping. Mwah. Te quiero mucho. That's real Spanish.